now we will talk about the topic. Like I said, this topic, if you're doing a master degree if you are doing a master degree, or if you are doing a PhD, you will be stuck with that topic for a long time. So it's really important that you actually choose a good topic. When I say a good topic, I mean a topic that you actually like working on, a topic that is good, and sometimes it has to be something contemporary, especially when it comes to PhDs, because in a PhD they always tell you to do something original, and that's one of the always answer. Can you hear me? Because someone says they cannot hear me. Yes, okay. If you don't hear me, then there might be a problem at your end. So if you don't mind, maybe checking your own speakers or headphones. Okay, so a lot of people ask me, Dr. Rasma, ما أدري شلون أختار الtopic. I don't know how to choose a topic. First things is, you need to read a lot. Go into there is a website. It's called Ethos British or something. I will share the link to it. In that website, you will see a lot of PhD theses, a lot of research, and also you can research topics online like PhD theses or master degree theses or journals like article published online. The Ethos, yes, exactly. Thank you, Lubna. Inshallah, I will send you all this information. I will, speaking of which, I just remembered, if you can fill in this form, because I might be doing like private tutoring, and I will I want to keep your email so I can send you the information. So this is a form. I shared the form in the not in the waiting room, in the meeting. Here, I shared the link or the form in the chat. If you can just fill in your emails, and I'll make sure to send you the website and the presentation and everything. So, like I said, now I'm stuck with the topic. I read articles, I read PhD theses, and you go right away to the conclusion where you will find a section called recommendations. Read the recommendations, because usually in the recommendation section, it's where researchers like me and the people before me and the people before the people before me, they would say, I advise researchers to conduct research on the following areas. So that will help you a lot. You will just look at it and be like, that's something I'm interested in. Maybe I should do that, okay? So that's one way of doing it. You read other people's work, and then you relate it to your own work. Sometimes there is very simple thing, which is basically to go original with something contemporary. How? A lot of people, they have problem when they hear the word original. Original means something someone else didn't do. It doesn't mean that you have to invent the wheel, because you can't. You will never come up with something that no one ever else did. So what you have to do is, for example, in 2001, I think, someone did a political discourse analysis of Jamal Abdel Nasser. In 2013, someone did a political discourse of Hosni Mubarak. In 2015, all the way till 2018, I did my research on Gaddafi and Hosni Mubarak. After me, there are people who did it on Morsi. So here is the idea, if you can understand what I'm saying. The idea is, I have a topic that is repeated with different characters. For example, in ages ago, someone did their PhD thesis on Bible translation or Quran translation. I did my master degree thesis in Quran translation, and it was totally different than what other people do. You can say, okay, I have a book and I need to do something about it. Like, for example, I have Quran translation. Okay, I have the first issue I can tackle is the grammar, the understanding, the theories, a number of things. So when it comes to a topic, your topic is something that you like. It's something that you create your own. How? By choosing the right topic. For example, I analyzed the near synonyms in the Quran. My colleague, if you've seen the first lecture, Dr. Moomin, analyzed the metaphor. Someone else would say, I will analyze how metaphor is created in the Quran and how is it translated. Someone else will say, I will have a comparative analysis of how the metaphors are translated in different Quran translations. So it's not how is the metaphor translated, but how the Quran is translated in different, the metaphor translated in different translation of the Quran, and which one is better. So this one is a comparative study. This one is an analytical study. And then you have someone who says, how many correct times did the writers do the Quran translation and how many wrong times? So again, you do it based on what you like. So you do your research based on what you feel is your strengths are. I like political discourse. I like analyzing overall, like the multimodality and everything. So that's why I did it that way. You can do it differently. Like, for example, when I analyzed Mubarak and Hosni Mubarak, I analyzed the narrative, the multimodality, discourse. You can only choose one thing. Like, I will analyze the critical discourse analysis of all Mubarak's speech. So here, again, it's based on what exactly you do with the topic that you choose, okay? So, previous research, like I said, which means you read other papers, whether articles, and sometimes articles are really short. And when it comes to articles, like we're writing an article, me and my colleague, in about the crisis now and about those new terms about coronavirus. But because an article is really like only 30 pages, so you can only write as much as 30 pages can count. I can discuss 2 or 3 terms and that's about it. But if you're doing your PhD next year, you can say, I will write about the importance of neologism, which is basically creating new terms, and how is it translated or how is it accepted and embraced and employed into our language. Why? Because it's really important. Like, look at coronavirus now. A lot of people in the press conferences call it Corona al-Mustajid. Some people call it COVID. Like in Arabic, virus COVID. And some people say virus Corona al-Mustajid. Some people say virus al-Taji. So here comes the multiple terms that exist. And you can actually sit down and have a research about it. How you target that research, how you evolve that research is basically up to you. You can say, why did those people say, it's one channel, and I'm only talking about Kuwait TV. In the newspaper, they say, in the news, النشرة الإخبارية, they say المستجد. In the programs, they say COVID. In the other مساء الخير, صباح الخير, whatever, they say التاجي. So they're all working in the same channel. They're all working in the same network, but everyone is doing different things. So you want to know why is people doing different things. So here is your research, for example. And that's basically one of the things when I say go into articles published online and research about it or read it, and then you will come up with ideas and why is it important. And then you can move on into recommendations in PhD theses, and we can move into something more original, which is basically the same idea, but you apply it on something different. I remember I had a question a couple of days ago. Someone said, دكتورة اسمع في أحد مسوي نفس بحثي بالضبط مال ال PhD and I don't know what to do. I said, you can still do it, but in a different way. For example, if you are doing your research in analyzing the number of times Al-Quran used al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat, or a specific style of linguistic style, change it. How does translators translate this linguistic style into translations, and choose one of the new translations and do your research about it with an old translation, for example. And here comes the originality. The originality, guys, does not necessarily means reinventing the wheel. It simply means that you have a research and you develop it in a new way, which is basically your methodology. The data can be the same. Gaddafi, Quran, the Bible, newspaper, Shakespeare, Kalila wa Dumna, whatever. But the way you analyze it, the way you study it is different than other people, and that's what matters. صحيح Hanouf. Of course, it's very popular. You will be surprised. Like if you go ahead and say political discourse analysis and translation, you will see Chinese research about Chinese people doing their research upon their own presidents. And then you will see people in Egypt, Jamal Abdel Nasser, Sadat, Hosni Mubarak, and Morsi. The generations, all of them are there. It's the same topic. It's the same technique, but it's different people. It's different language. It's different theories. You can even change the theory. يعني, for example, I'm doing Hosni Mubarak ala critical discourse analysis. You will do Sadat ala narrative. She will do Morsi ala I don't know, equivalence, domestication, and foreignization. So here comes the idea of originality. Here comes where you are thinking of how do you change the topic based on whatever works best for you, okay? I hope this one is clear, because I know a lot of people hate this part. But my advice, always choose a topic that you would like to work with, because you will be stuck with that topic for years, especially if you're doing a PhD. So it has to be something that you really like, you enjoy reading, so you feel motivated. I enjoyed my research, every bit of it, because I loved it. I cannot suggest any theories, unfortunately, because it depends on your topic. For example, if you're doing political discourse, there are many different topics, but again, it's what you are analyzing. You can choose the topic based on. Sorry, you can choose the theory based on. So if I tell you, okay, I will do my research on political discourse translation. Yeah, but what do you want to do exactly? Do you want to see if it's translated correctly, if it has the same effect, if it was changed because of the media? What exactly do you want to see? What exactly is your purpose? And then you can choose the theory based on that. Okay, then we are moving into... We have a question? Okay, then we move into a very important aspect, which is basically choosing the methodology. And here also comes the part where you can play with your research. So if someone did a quantitative approach, you can change it into a qualitative approach, and then you have a new research, you have an original idea. The difference between quantitative and qualitative is very important, and a lot of people do not know that. The quantitative is basically about numbers. When you do your analysis based on numbers, so it's all numbers based. You are doing interviews, you're doing analysis, surveys, and polls, and you will have to, you will say, my research is quantitative because I will see the number of times translators or interpreters use this word and this word and this word. Okay, so that's number one. And then in the analysis, you'll say, or the conclusion, you'll say, so I have found out that the numbers of times translators use this word is this. The numbers of times people use this word is. Or the number of times people use this approach. Like, you know, we have a lot of approaches in interpreting. We have summarizing, we have skipping, we have anticipating. So maybe you are analyzing the interpretation of a speech in Fox News. For example, Trump's interpretation into Arabic in Fox News. So you will say the number of times the interpreter used the summarizing approach is 5 times, while he used the anticipating approach or the word-for-word translation 3 times. For example, I'm just giving random examples. And then on the other hand, we have qualitative, which is basically about a text, analyzing the details in the text. Like in the interpreting session for Fox News, the interpreter did not interpret these words. He replaced these words with other words and so on. So the qualitative it's based from quality. How is the quality of the text? However, quantitative is how many times. So quantitative is number-based, qualitative is text-based. My research was both. So I said, why did those presidents use these words as in a number of times? For example, Gaddafi, I remember he used the word I for 105 times, which is quite a lot, to basically show his importance and to tell the people about his achievements and to praise himself. So again, it's one of the ways to actually tell the people how to do it. I also used a link between the word, which is, I'll give you an example about how to use those two theories together, like the qualitative and the quantitative. So what I did is I took the word الثورة in al-Gaddafi speech, and I analyzed how many times it was said throughout the 1-hour speech and why was it said more than once. Al-Gaddafi used the word الثورة for 5 times approximately, and the reason he did that is because the word الثورة means a lot in the Libyan culture. It has a lot of meaning. It means resistance. It means glory because of the demonstrations and revolution that happened before with the king and so on. So to al-Gaddafi as well, to the Libyans, the word thawra means a lot, and that's why he repeated it. So here I analyzed why the word thawra means and was used a lot of times and what it means to the Libyans, and I give a number of why it was repeated in that culture, or in that speech, sorry. We have a question. Can you give us an example of text-based? Text-based, like I said, is basically when you analyze the text. For example, if we have words like قتل and قاتل, or al-jasad and al-jism, like we said before in the Quran translation session, and how those two words actually mean different things. Or a very important example is أيام الانكسار وأيام الاحتلال, which means in the Egyptian culture حرب 1900 حرب أكتوبر, but for us a lot of translators will simply translate it into days of sorrow or days of occupation, but it doesn't simply mean أيام الاحتلال, it means حرب سيناء. So here is the analysis of text-based. When you have a text and you analyze the meaning of the text, you analyze the cultural references of the text, you analyze the choice words, like why did the person saying those words chose those specific words, and what does it have as an influence or effect on the reader or on the audience. Okay, so we move into how do we start writing. This is one of the most difficult questions that people always ask. Dr. Asma, how do we write? People are different. You have to understand this. People are different. There is no problem in saying I'm different than you, I write differently, and so on. But the most important thing is the last product. The last product is what matters, not really. Is qualitative approach similar to discourse analysis? It's similar, but it's not really discourse analysis. A qualitative approach, sorry, it's analyzing the text. So when I say analyzing the text, I can analyze the multimodality of the text. يعني مثلا, you analyze the body language, you analyze how the newspapers have the title differently, you analyze how the person is saying specific words other than others to mean a specific ideology. You analyze how translators chose parts of the translation to show it and not choose other parts to shape the ideas that they want to shape, or to change the narrative, for example. So it's not necessarily similar. Okay, now about how do we start writing? How do you take a pen or start typing on your computer and suddenly start writing your PhD? Are you going to do it in one day? Are you going to suddenly sit down and finish writing 100 pages? No. This is really difficult. It will drive you insane. It will be very difficult and hard, but you will do it if you want to do it. How do we start writing? People are different. So you will see a lot of people starting with the introduction. You will see a lot of people that they want to basically start writing with the results and the findings. You will see people who will start writing sections, like random sections. It's okay as long as you basically stick to one format and then go on for it. The way I like to do it, and most people suggest that you do it, is you start with the methodology, results, and then the last thing that you write is the introduction. Why? I'll tell you one simple reason. If you write the methodology, or if you start with the literature review introduction and you just go on forward, and then when you're writing your results, you discover that you didn't mention something in the literature review, so you have to go back and write it. And then you discover that this question is not really good enough for your findings, so you come up with a new questions. And a lot of people do that. When they analyze the data, they find out another questions. So you'll say, I don't like that questions. I'm just gonna go ahead and change it. And sometimes you end up changing the chapters. Like instead of one chapter for the results, you will have 2 chapters. So what you will do is basically go ahead and change it for another time. So what a lot of supervisors suggest is just have your introduction written in the last time. So basically, I have a lot of weird names and I really want to let them in because I'm afraid that they're really interested, but I'm not sure if they are hackers. Let me just let this person in and watch them for a little bit. Just give me 1 minute. I'm watching someone. Yeah, I figured. Okay. What did you use, Dr. Axma, for the quantitative analysis when continuing the number of certain words mentioned by the subjects? It's a question. Well, what I used discourse analysis, narrative, and multimodality. And then I applied it on the numbers and the quantitative and qualitative, both of them at the same time. Okay. So, like I said, with this charting and how do you start writing, you're welcome, Lubna. So, for me, my advice is, what you do is basically sit down and then brainstorm your ideas. And what I mean by brainstorm your ideas is have a piece of paper and write down the things that you will want to write in the, like have a piece of paper and then write down chapter 1. I will write about, let's see a topic that we will say today. For example, coronavirus. First, in the first chapter, I'll identify coronavirus, and then in the literature review, and then I will discuss how is medical term translated throughout the years, and what are the theories using those theories. So that's number 1. Then you move into another thing, which is the chapter 2. And then you move into chapter 3, and so on. Now you have your ideas. If you want, you can have certain sections. Like in each section, you write down the sections and then you fill it in. That would make your life easier. What I did is basically I had each chapter in a different document. Like chapter 1 is one document, chapter 2 is another document, chapter 3 is another document, and so on. The reason why I did this is because I wanted to, give me 1 minute, guys.
Hi, can I interrupt for like 10 seconds?
Okay, here we go. You can interrupt now. Okay, so the reason why I did that is because I wanted to see each chapter and how many words it had, and then I wanted to fill it in without really messing the whole document, because you need to be aware of the headings, and once you make them, so you can eventually have the index for you or for the table of contents. So you don't want to mess it up. So I had different chapters. In each chapter, I have a rough name for the chapter. Of course, the titles of each headings and of the chapter names, you have to do that at the end. That comes with the editing, because you'll just sit down and look at the chapter and be like, yeah, I'll just call it this. And then you will fill it in accordingly. But the most important thing is you gathered your data, you read enough, and you want to start writing. So you sit down and say, okay, these are the 3 things that I will analyze. Because what I did is I ended up writing way much more than the word limit, because instead of analyzing 3 aspects, I analyzed 4. And then I ended up analyzing 4 into each chapter, which meant that, I had a whole section that I had to delete. And that's effort on you. And then when you have actually to go back and delete everything, that's a lot of effort as well. And you have to make sure that you delete chapter 4 here, chapter 4 here, and it will be annoying. So my advice is, from the beginning, decide the 3 to 1 point that you will discuss. And that again comes to whatever you're discussing. If you're discussing a whole speech, of course it's going to be long. So you don't have to narrow it down, but you have to just give yourself points that you will discuss and be consistent. If you are discussing 2 different translations, you have to discuss only 1 or 2 points, because otherwise it will be a lot. So always be aware of the points that you will be discussing, and then have it written down so you don't go over the limit and you work extra hard, and then unfortunately it will not be included in your thesis. And then when you sit down and you start writing, when you're done with the methodology, now you know that this is your data and this is how you will analyze it using this theory. And when you say how you're going to analyze it, you will say you are going to analyze it using these 3 aspects, for example, like the linguistics aspect and the social aspect. Okay, so you will have to write it down. Now you go to the results and you analyze and you start writing. When you're done with your analysis, you can now go back to your literature review and start writing it. You can finish your conclusion, and then you can start your introduction and start these other chapters, and you have to look at it all together in one document. Like instead of having 2, 3, 4 chapters, you can look at it all as one document and start reading, start drafting. I always have, the yellow comments bar to highlight things that I'm not really sure of, that I don't like and might change. And then print each chapter and let it be. Don't read it. You need to have a break for like 2, 3 days and then start reading. The reason why I say this is because sometimes when you have a fresh eyes, it's better to read, because sometimes when we look at things, we don't really know if they're good enough or not. But once we look at them again, we realize that these are really good information. So that's really important. You need to be aware of your grammar mistake, your your punctuality, punctuation, your structure-wise, and also the flow of the information. You also need to be aware of the redundancy. You don't want to repeat one information twice or three times. Like, you will see this information here, and then after 2 pages, you will see the information again. You don't want the reader to be like, I just read this two pages ago. So you need to be aware of that, and that's your responsibility. I know 300 pages is a lot, but you have to be aware of it. So so you really have to, my advice is finish each chapter and then sit down. So you have two steps of proofreading the chapter. When you finish the methodology, give yourself a day or two. Take a rest. It's your right. You have 3 years, 4 years to write your PhD thesis. Give yourself a rest of 1 or 2 days when you're done with the chapter, all of it with the titles, everything, and then print it, let it be. 2 days later, go have fun. Go out with your friends, with your wife, with your husband, whatever, with your kids, with your mom, your family, whatever you want to do. And then come back home, read it after 2 days. You will have a fresh eyes. What I mean by fresh eyes, it's the eyes of a reader. So you don't really know what you wrote. And then you will see, what did I mean when I said that? And start highlighting the things that doesn't make sense so you can change them. And then change them. You're done with that chapter, go to another chapter. Do the same process. When you're done with all the chapters, print it all out and have a sit down, and then reread it again after a couple of 3 days already. So this is basically what I give as an advice. Now, references. This is really important. As a PhD student or a master degree student, you will have a lot of references. You will have more than 10 pages of references. So how do you do it? How do you keep up with the references without forgetting? Because I remember at the desk, I had this much of pile of books right next to me, and the library, they have a loan policy that you have to return the book after 2 months, and I need the book because I want to reference them. So I don't really have the time to just keep them by my side. I had to reference them while I go. So what I did is, when you're writing each chapter, go to references in Word document and then insert citation. You will have to insert the name of the book, the year of the book, all the necessary information. And then here you have style. You need to choose your style. Our style was APA. There is Oxford style, there's Oxford style, there is MA, there is MLA, and there are different styles. So it's basically different styles, and it's whatever style that is your style basically. And be careful. You have to use the same style. You have to use the same language, the same English. If it's American English or British English, and it's down there. You can highlight the whole document and say English, British or American English, because you have to be consistent. You can't in chapter 1 write color with U and then in chapter 2 write it without the U. You have to be consistent. If you use English with British English, you have to be British English. If you use American English, it has to be American English throughout the documents. Similarly to the style of referencing. If you use APA, it has to be APA all over the document. So you insert the citation, you insert all the information. I know it can be a little bit trouble when you do it, but it will make your life way much easier, believe me. So once you're doing this, you insert, okay, so you're using this book, you look at it, okay, publisher, year of publishing, the name of the book, and so on. And then you just simply click on it, and you will see it will make the reference for you. So if the reference is Al-Idhayim 2010, it will say Al-Idhayim 2010. And then when you go on again and you need to actually write it again, you will simply go into the references, click on it, and it will give you the same reference again, and instead of retyping the whole thing. So that's for your effort and for your time. It's amazing. It will give you way much less time to actually worry about you know, looking at the book and which number is it. It's already sorted there. It's already saved there. You simply click on it. You will see all the references. You just click on the reference that you want and it will be there with the style that you want. If it's APA style, you will see it like Eldheim and then comma and then the number. If it has a page number, it will have the dots. If it's MLA, it will have just the slash or something, and that's all. And when you're done, and you go to the references, you simply click on bibliography and it will list down all the references that you had alphabetically with the style that you wanted, which is APA or MLA or whatever. So that's really important because it saves time. It makes sure that you actually have all the references, because a lot of times people, when they go to their PhDs, Vivas, you will see some books that are not there in the reference list. And a lot of examiners will be picky and they will say, oh, so this reference you mentioned in page so-and-so is not there in the reference list. Can you say why? And then it's problematic. It will show that you're not professional. But again, when you have 200 references or more that you used, it will be really difficult to list all of them. Like, I don't advise you to finish writing and then you just sit down and write each one of them. So this is the first way to do it, which is basically using the Word document itself. I'm not sure about the one that you wrote, Abdullah. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of. أسماء تقول جربتها بس it's not accurate. All the programs are not accurate. So just like I said with the drafts, how you have to print it and then look at it with a fresh look, you have to print your references and look at them as well. I had to actually go, like I had to print out the thesis and then print out the reference list and then go into my thesis, and each reference that I find, I go into the reference list and I check if it's there or not. And if it's not there, I highlight it. But even other applications and software are not very accurate as well, because we're talking about more than 100 books. So of course, machines are not going to be accurate. So you need to review everything. It's a process of reviewing once and again. Believe me, I cannot tell you how many times you will review your or proofread your thesis. You will do it endlessly. Even, you know, before you submit it, you will just look at it and be like, I'm not sure. So this is the first way. The second way is Google Scholar. And to be honest, I did 2 ways. I actually did 3 ways, to be honest. I did it all just to be sure that everything is there. I was getting really obsessed. So, so how I did it is basically this. I opened up a document. I called it reference list. So I was doing that type, which is basically within Word. It's inside Word, and it will just automatically list down the references. But I also, when I have a book by my side and I'm reading or using that reference or an article, I'll go to Google Scholar, and this is a very important way. You go to Google Scholar and then you just write down the book's name or the title of it. It will show the book and all the information. You will go to these citations, if you can see them here, and then it will give you the right way to reference that book or article or whatever in all the different styles. So we have MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard, and Vancouver. So you will just simply copy, paste into your document. So what I did is to make sure that I have them in the Word document that I'm working on, and I have them separately in a reference list, and then I copy it and I put it in it's just basically, I type the name and then I copy the link or the reference, which is APA, and I put it in the reference list. So it was a big document with more than, I don't know how many pages that has basically the reference list. And just to make sure, I used the reference software. It's called EndNote. EndNote is a software that you have to buy. So I used to use it in the university because it was only available in the university's computers, and I used to study with my own laptop. I don't like to use the computers. So at the end of the day, I'll go to the computer, or sometimes by the end of the week, I'll go to the university's computer in my office, and I'll just take the list that I showed you, when I copy paste, and I will insert manually each and every one of these references, basically, whether it's a book, whether it's an article. And the nice aspect about this software is basically EndNote saves the PDF files. So if the book is online, you will actually see it. If the article is online at a PDF, it will save it. But the problem that I had to suffer with is because I don't have it on my laptop. I only have it in my computer, and that's why I didn't really like using it. And I also faced problems because I still used it, and when I converted it, because what happens is it's like a platform basically to save up all your references, and then you just click on export to Word, and then it will export all the references into the style you choose, whether APA, MLA, or whatever, into the Word document. But also, I noticed that it missed 2 or 3 references. And I told you it will never be perfect. I did all these 3 ways, and I read my draft. I had other people read my draft, like my friends, my colleagues, and still, I actually missed 2 references. And I only found out after submitting my paper, and I went home. I submitted my paper. I did my PhD in University of Birmingham, and when I submit, you have 2 months or something before your Viva. I took my PhD, like I printed it so I can study it before my Viva, and I went home. And when I went home, I was reading through it, and I noticed that there were 2 references that were missing, and that was shocking for me because I honestly used 3 ways to reference them, and still I ended up missing 2 references. So it's really important that you keep your references and try to keep them in 2 different documents if you want, because I also used Arabic documents, and that's really difficult because you need to separate them. Like you need to have reference list for Arabic sites or resources. You need to have YouTube and electronic resources, and you need to have books and the English ones, the normal references. So it's really important to be able to actually keep all of those together. And it was really hard for me at the beginning because we're reading a lot of books, and then sometimes you actually end up deleting a lot of paragraphs that you don't need, so you have to end up deleting those references as well. So it's a process. But if you organize yourself, if you have enough data basically saved, and you have more than 1 backup. So my backup was 1 in Word references, 1 in EndNote, and 1 that I created myself, like I copy paste myself, just to make sure. And one piece of advice before we go to the next bit of this presentation is save your PhD and your chapters and all of it on your computer, on your USB, on another USB that you don't use, on your emails, everywhere, because you have no idea what can happen. You have no idea, and it happened to me. I used, like I was drinking coffee and it spilled all over my laptop, and my whole data was gone in 1 minute. And another day, something just randomly happened to my laptop. It was a new laptop, and it just suddenly died, and all the data was gone. So that taught me to do 2 things. I have always click save all the time. Like when I add 2 lines, I'll click save. When I add the whole paragraph, I'll click save, just to make sure that it's updated. And by the end of the day, it's like a norm, like you brush your teeth or before you go to bed. I always have my USB, like the other USB, because I used to, 1 that I always carry around and 1 that is by my bed, and I only use it to update my thesis every day. I plug it into my USB, into my laptop. I save the new documents that I worked on today, just in case the laptop goes bad and the USB goes bad, just in case, because you never know. Being in the UK and being in working in the library sometimes with different laptops and different computers, sometimes they have viruses that can infect your laptop as well as USB. Also, yes, I do actually I do save it through the emails and iCloud and Google Drive, all of that. But just to make sure, because I have an obsession that someone might actually steal my work or something. So what I used to do is I used to save it and then email it to my personal account, like from my university account to my personal account. So it's there in my email. So it has to be there. It's either in my email, it's either in my two USBs, my computer at work, my computer in the library, everywhere. So this is just basically an advice for you to use. Now I will move to the last bit of this presentation, which is basically general tips, and then we can take all questions that you guys like. The first tip is, don't ever, ever, ever be ashamed of your writing, because we're all different. We all write differently, and writing is a very difficult thing, and there is no sustained or consistent way of training people how to write academically. Everyone teach it differently. Everyone has different sides or different practices and different likings. Some people like it to be complicated, some people like it to be very simple. But one piece of advice: if you're writing in English, English is very precise, English is very straightforward. Don't overdo it. It's not like Arabic. They don't use a lot of words to communicate the information. Communicate the information as simple as you want. And the disaster that I always see, whether with my colleagues and PhDs who were doing their PhDs, or in the essays that I corrected for students, please do not translate. I've seen a lot of people who write their thesis in Arabic and then translate it in English, and that's a big mistake, because the writing in Arabic differs completely than in English. It's completely different process. You cannot do it the same. You just cannot do it similarly. And when you translate, you're translating. You're not really writing. So it's another mistake that you will make. Don't use fancy words. A lot of people will go to Word and then they click on something and then right click. Okay, this sounds fancy and sophisticated. Let me use it. Sometimes it's the wrong word. Sometimes it's an archaic word that people don't use anymore. And sometimes it's just a good word, but it's not used in that type of language. So you would give yourself away basically by using someone else's words or language that is not used anymore. Be aware of the language norms, and that's what I always tell my students. Writing in English is completely different than writing in Arabic. Arabic use different structures, English use different structures. In English, redundancy is frowned upon. In Arabic, redundancy is amazing and everyone loves it. In Arabic, I mean, so do not use the same norms. Do not use the same rules in these two languages. It's a different language. It has a different rules. It has a different way of approaching the language and the information. And do not overdo things. Do not overuse specific words. Do not overuse transitions. Do not overuse long sentences. In English, you can have just small sentences. In Arabic, your sentence can go along into a whole paragraph. Here is the difference that you need to be aware of. Always save your work, like I said. And I'm willing to take any questions if anyone is willing to ask anything. I'm just going through really quick through my notes if I have any more tips. Oh, and one piece of advice: do not let anyone write for you, because people will know. People will know. I always know. I always know when my students cheat and they have someone else write for them, and I always tell them, I know it's not you. Because being a linguist and being a writer and a reviewer for journals, I know if this is you or someone else. Even if you write me an email and you wrote me an email before, I would know if it's you or someone else. So do not do it, because your supervisor will end up knowing, and it won't look bad. It will just look bad on you. So that's one of the things that I would like to say. And there is no such thing as perfectionism. So do not try to be perfect, because you can never be perfect. When it comes to a 5 years or 4 years work of a PhD, you'll never be perfect. So just try as much as you can to perfect it to a level that you're happy with, and then present it and submit it. Because you will never be able, like, okay, here. You will always say, no, I will want to work on it more. But if it communicates what you want to say, if it's understandable, then just go ahead and send it. And if it's accurate, just go ahead and submit it. Okay, I'll take any questions now, whether you want to ask them in the mic or you want to just ask them in the chat. You're very welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Hiba, my research is online. If you can just Google my name, you will see it in Google Scholar.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Asma. It's very informative lecture. I have two questions. The first question is, if I want to investigate the methodology of an Arabic translation work, a novel, for example, into English, what's the best methods I have to apply here?
So basically, sorry, just one thing I want to say. The PowerPoint presentation is in the chat now, if anyone needs it. And like I said, if you want to fill in the form, I will be able to send you more links. بالنسبة للquestion, so you asked me, sorry, I'll wrap up the question again. If you are doing, if you want to investigate a translated text, right?
Yes.
And you want to, what exactly do you want to translate in the text?
Yeah, I would like
analyze,
to,
in the text.
Yeah, I would like to investigate how a translator deal with the difficult challenges, difficulty, linguistic aspect, or social or cultural aspect of the text. That's it.
If you want to understand the cultural aspects of the text, the best way to go for it is the critical discourse analysis, or simply discourse analysis. And discourse analysis goes into more than one writer. You have Van Du, which basically analyzes the power and the social practice in the language, meaning how language is different when I talk to you, and when I talk to a kid, and when I talk to someone in power, and I use different words like لو سمحت, or when I use different words when I talk to someone who is like a student, like do this and go do that. So basically, Van Du studies language and power, and language and social practice. And critical discourse analysis and Fairclough, they analyze language in general, like the words they use, the ideological meaning behind these words, the cultural references behind these words, the grammar use, and how does it affect the listener or the reader. All of these aspects you can use critical discourse analysis by either Fairclough or by Van Du.
Thank you so much. My second question is if you can recommend any application for Arabic transliteration.
Transliteration, you mean as in transliterate, right? Like the same thing.
Yes.
Yes. So there are not a lot of approaches when it comes to that, but there are a lot of what do they call them? The tables, the charts that gives you the word, and sorry, the letter, and the way it should be transliterated into the other language or specific words. I don't have them in my resource because I've never used it, but you can find them online if you Google them, and you will find them online. You can use it to transliterate the words basically, and you can use the names and the because when you transliterate, the meaning of the words are translated, but the names and the specific things that you should just transliterate, they should have a whole chart of table that you need to take these words and copy paste it, because some letters should have like hyphens and stuff on them. There is a standardized table online. I don't remember, to be honest, the name of the person who did it, but it's online and it's standardized. If you just write it down, you will find it.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Okay, we have Hayakallah Ahmed, we have questions. I don't know if we had a question before. My research is available. If you just Google, if you just write down Asma al-Dhayim, similarly in English, you will find my research and even my PhD thesis if you want to look at the structure. And if you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you will find all my research. I always retweet it. Or you can simply send me an email and I will send you, here is my email, asmaldahaim@hotmail.co.uk. I will send you the researches and fill in the form that I sent you a little bit ago. I will give you the link to the form again. I always send the newsletters with my research, if there is a new research that I submitted, and so on. Sorry, I will just read the questions again because I missed a couple of them. Okay, دقيقة, please, let me see the question. After finishing the thesis, how to publish it and how to publish it in accredited journals? This is a question from Ahmed. Ahmed, so basically when you finish your thesis, my advice is do not publish the whole thesis as a book. You can do that. You can approach any publisher and be like, here's my thesis, it's a book. Can you publish it? A lot of people do that, but when you do that, you lose many aspects. One of them is the ability to have more than one article. So basically, you need to take your article, you need to take your thesis and develop different articles from them. How do you approach accredited journals? You need to go to the journals and check the required section, because sometimes journals require a specific genre during that month or that year. For example, one of the journals that I like requires a political translation at this year. So you can only send them abstracts or articles related to political translation. If it's not political translation, they're not interested. So they will not really take your research. So you need to research the journals and then see if it's the one that you like to publish in, and then send them your work. And you have to do it in a certain standards and formats, because each journal requires different formats. Some will require APA, some will require MLA, and so on. Then let's see the other question. وياك ناصر, شكرا. الله يحفظك, شكرا. Emil is saying, there is a research about comparative translation. There are many research about comparative translation. My research is about comparative translation in the Quran, and then I did a comparative translation in political discourse. And I've seen so many. I've seen comparative political discourse in China. I've seen comparative discourse of Egyptian presidents like Morsi, Hosni Mubarak, Sadat, and Nasser. There are many comparative studies when it comes to translation, because a lot of people like to try to compare two translations and see which one is better, if they can see that. You're welcome, Hassan. Do you recommend publishing parts of the thesis before or after? After, because the problem was Abdullah's asking if I recommend publishing parts of the thesis before the Viva or after. It would be good to publish and to go to your Viva saying I have published a paper, but my advice is during your studies as a PhD student, go to a lot of conferences. Being in a conference will give you the confidence to actually talk about your research. A lot of people will approach you asking questions that you can develop later on in your thesis and actually have in your conclusion or your analysis. It will help you change things. That's what happened to me as well. And it will make you comfortable talk about your research. I felt way more comfortable talking about my research and presenting, which made me really comfortable going to my Viva, because I already published my work two times already in a conference. But when it comes to publishing an article, be careful, because it might be considered plagiarism, and you don't want to submit your work and then it will be considered plagiarism, because plagiarism is counted even if you publish some of your work and it's your work, but it's considered plagiarism because it's published before the Viva. So be careful when it comes about that. Wait, let's see the other questions we have. And do you use any kind of theories comparative translation? It depends. In political discourse, I used the theories that I told you about. And I used the equivalence theory in the Quran translation. And you're welcome, Amal. You're very welcome. Okay, I think that's the... Is there a difference between ideology and stereotypes? Yeah, there's a lot of differences actually. Stereotyping is when you think all people are, you know, the same, like all Kuwaitis are rich, for example, or all Arabs are rich, or all Americans are violent or something. It's something like that. But when it comes down to ideology, ideology is what you believe and you secretly show throughout your speech. For example, a viva is the PhD exam. مناقشة الدكتوراه. Hiba, answering Hiba's question, the difference between ideology and stereotypes, ideology is what you believe and your ideas and thoughts and how it is projected and presented, conveyed through the speeches that you say or through the language that you use. For example, when you use Israeliyin and instead of saying Sahayina, and that's one of the reasons that people always use stuff like that. This is ideology. Ideology, like Muammar Gaddafi, the way he thought that the reason why people are demonstrating against him is because they want to turn this state or Libya into Balad Islami, and it's due to America's intervention. Americans are going to come and they will take the land just like they did with Iraq. So this is again ideology, what you believe in, what drives you, and what you go on as a person. Do we have any other questions? You're very welcome, dear. Allah يعافيك. شكرا. Do we have any other questions before we conclude?
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام. هلا حبيبتي. تفضلي.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Asma, for this wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
My question is, I would like to know, what is a reasonable word count for a proposal, please?
A proposal, it depends. When you have a proposal, it depends on different universities. Some universities will simply ask for 1,000-word proposal. I don't really remember my proposal, how many words it was, but you have, when it comes down to the proposals or the required things by universities, it completely differs from one country to another and from one university to another. Some universities will simply ask you for an abstract or like a proposal. Some universities will simply ask you for your PhD, your master degree thesis, and like a short summary of it, or to add something of if you want to continue your master degree or you want to start a new thesis or a new research. So again, it depends on the university itself. My advice is go to your to the university that you think you would want to apply to and see their requirements for applying for the course. But most of the time, people always request a 1,000-word proposal. In the proposal, they will ask you for the questions, the research questions, the reason for the study or for the research or the problem that you want, and the data that you want to use. Because the reason why they do that is they want to see if there is a supervisor who is willing to take your research or not. Because a lot of times people take their research or the proposal and then they change the theory, they change the data, or they simply change the whole process. Because after all, it has to be an understanding between you and the supervisor who is willing to basically be your supervisor. Wait, we have a lot of questions. Can you just give me 1 minute to scroll up? Okay, so we have, is there a difference between communicative approach and dynamic equivalence? The communicative approach is similar to the dynamic equivalence, but the thing is, when Nord came out with these words, there is actually Mona Baker's book, In Another Word, actually summarizes all of those. And there is also translation studies by Jeremy Monday. Those two books, the most important things about these two books, it tells you how the theory evolves eventually. Like, it started with NIDA's equivalence theory, and then it developed to dynamic and communicative approach, and domestication and foreignization, which basically is the same thing. It's the way you choose to translate the text, but a little bit twisted differently. But it is the same, I believe so, yeah. هل أستطيع كتابة بحث أو رسالة باللغة الإنجليزية باستخدام مصادر عربية؟ You can use Arabic references because eventually you're using an Arabic text, or your data is Arabic, but you have to use English resources, unfortunately. If you are writing in an English language research, if you are writing in the UK, I'm afraid, Noor, you have to use English resources, because you will want to read these books because it will improve your language, it will improve your writing, and these books are related to your work. So you will be asked in the Viva, why didn't you use these references? And this is really an important question. A lot of people get asked, like if you're talking about political discourse and translation, and in the political discourse and translation now, Christina Schaffner has a big deal of theories and research published about that area. So if you don't mention her at all, people will say, you didn't mention Christina Schaffner. So you have to mention her, even if it's just a page or so, you have to mention her in the literature review. We have a question by Khalid. Do you have any other lectures about research in the future? And thank you again. Inshallah, if I do, I will publish them. You will know, if you can kindly follow me in Instagram or Twitter, you will get all the updates about my lectures, whether online or after Corona, inshallah, the workshops. I'm seriously thinking of having a workshop in Saudi, inshallah, very soon, or Kuwait, but we need to know what's going to happen with Corona so we can have these workshops and so on, inshallah. Emil is asking, can I mention your webinar in my doctoral social thing? I think so. It will be recorded. So once I'm done with the recording session, I always upload it into the YouTube. So in the references, you can list it as a YouTube resource instead of a webinar, because that will be better. Inshallah, inshallah. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions? No? Any other questions? No? Shall we conclude then? You're very welcome, Nusayba. You're very welcome. Okay, so just to conclude, I would really like to say that it takes a lot. It takes a lot. Thank you, Fatma. It takes really a lot to write. It takes a lot to basically finish a PhD or a research. But once you put your mind to it, you can definitely do it. It's really a very hard process, but it's easy if you choose to and if you want to do it. There is always something with time. You need to give yourself time. If you're stuck, don't ever let anyone hesitate or doubt your abilities. Even sometimes you'll find supervisors saying, oh, this is not really good enough, but don't ever worry about that, because people will always, you're very welcome, Faiza, because people will always try to make things harder for you. But if you really want something, you can make it happen. Inshallah, all the best for anyone. If you need any help or direction, please don't hesitate to email me or talk to me in Twitter. Inshallah, all the best. I'm sure everyone of you will be something, inshallah, and do a great research that we will be really wanting to read soon. يعطيكم العافية. And thank you for being here. Inshallah, I'll see you soon. Inshallah. يعطيكم العافية. Thank you very much.